This week's episode was brought to you by Hannah Andre, Lauren Conti Catalano, Joby Bauer, Rose Goldfish, and Brendan Gween. Thank you, Hannah Andre, Lauren Conti Catalano, Joby Bauer, Rose Goldfish, and Brendan Gween. It's with the generous support of listeners just like you that keeps the Whole Rabbit transmitting our weekly episodes from the far side of the moon, directly into the mind stream of our listeners using nightwave conduction thought lasers developed by the reptilians in a classified location under the lunar surface. If you'd like to help keep the Whole Rabbit moon base pressurized with breathable oxygen, or just hear the second half of this episode, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you the second half of this episode, but all of our episodes in the library on your podcast player of choice through our convenient RSS feed format that I have now been informed works natively in Spotify. But that's not all. I'll send you a 5x5 high quality sticker of our Big Bunny cover art created with gray alien repulsive vinyl and sticky stuff on the back, which is very sticky for sticking itself to things, alongside being given instant access to our Discord server, which is like a futuristic version of AOL Instant Messenger where you can hang out and discuss moon math with the creators and fans of the show in real time. On this week's episode, we're joined again by the illustrious Mr. Tim Hacker of the Cryptic Chronicles podcast, crypticchronicles.com, to discuss the well-researched anomalies associated with the moon and bring into clear focus a number of utterly astounding qualities which shroud a mystery and a truly colossal secret. We investigate the unlikely correspondence between the apparent size of the sun and moon alongside its mythological explanation from the Aztecs, discuss prevailing scientific theories old and new about its unknown origins, Stanley Kubrick's conspiratorial involvement in the Apollo missions, and well-documented anomalies above and below the lunar surface which hint at the moon's true purpose. In the extended episode, we discuss the effect the moon has on human consciousness, the role it played in evolution of intelligent life, the utterly baffling mathematical correspondence between the sun, moon, and earth we find mysteriously encoded into ancient religion, and hear the fascinating account of SRI's best remote viewer, Ingo Swann's top secret mission to survey what is hiding on the far side of the moon, which blew his mind and hopefully yours too. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Oh, UFOs. Like when you look at the International Space Station, like the footage that it has of Earth, you can see fucking UFOs in NASA footage.
That's crazy.
And it's funny because NASA will turn the camera away from them.
Hey guys, why couldn't the moon eat anymore? It was a full moon. How does the moon cut his hair?
With cheese slices.
Eclipse it.
Oh, God.
Why don't people like going to the moon?
Why?
It has no atmosphere.
They're on...
More dad jokes.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Whole Rabbit, where we don't just tell you the moon is hollow and full of lizards. Nay, we use high-tech telemetry tracking satellites, seismological apparatuses, and high-velocity impacts from deorbited spacecraft to prove it, because this week, we're discussing the secrets of the moon. Where did it come from? And most importantly, what the heck is it even in the first place? I'm your host, Hack Rabbit, otherwise known as Luke Madrid. I'm joined this week by the celestial crescent corgi person, Mari Sama.
Woo! Hello.
That means you're the CCCP.
Oh, come on.
The maniacal moon man, Malachor 5.
What's up?
And the lunar luminary, Heka Astra.
Hello.
This week, we're joined once again by the extragalactic host and creator of the Cryptic Chronicles podcast, the illustrious Mr. Tim Hacker, who docked with us in orbit to write 80% of the show for us this week, and got us all to revisit the lunar surface together as a family. Thank you, and welcome to the show, Mr. Tim Hacker.
Hello, I'm really an alien. Please take me to your brain. brains.
I learned on Twitter today that the brain and spinal cord is just a highly mature sperm cell.
Cool.
Yeah, that's kind of wild, huh? Like if you think about it that way.
Also, everybody's born with a vagina.
Not born, but like when you first start growing, yes.
Technicalities.
But as you develop, you either continue to develop or you don't.
A vagina.
No, it starts out the same, and then the penis grows out of the same tissue flesh.
Based on if the moon likes it or not, it becomes a vagina or a wiener.
Yeah.
Either your ovaries drop down and become balls and your clit becomes a dick, or it doesn't.
It's a fact.
It depends on how much shellfish your mom eats on the third Wednesday of every month. I'm so happy you got us talking about the moon, Tim. It's humanity's original rabbit hole. And even today, with all our modern understanding, we're still not to the bottom of it.
At first glance, the idea that the moon may not be what we've been told seems ridiculous. In our modern world, we are indoctrinated from birth that there are only two sorts of things in existence. Things that came to be through nature and things that humanity created. Pretty simple, right? After all, we live in a scientific, fact-based world, don't we? For anyone who can metaphorically pull their head out of the sand, look around themselves, and see the light outside of Plato's cave, things are not always what they seem. In fact, they rarely are. In U.S. polls and surveys, it shows that an astonishingly high amount of the population believes in the paranormal, God, aliens, ghosts, you name it. Despite being raised in a culture of dogmatic scientism, despite all the mundane and sterilized worldviews oppressing humanity, we always maintain a connection to that side of ourselves that has yet to leave nature and most likely never will. In the end, our minds are always drawn to the weird, and who are we to deny the unpredictability and weirdness inherent in nature?
I'm living proof.
Yes, we all know you're a reptilian starseed.
I'm not reptilian.
The truth is, in the cosmic big picture of things, we know next to nothing as a species. The entire accumulation of all human knowledge is less than a single drop in the ocean. Humanity loves putting labels on things and putting them in little boxes to give ourselves a false sense of control over our lives. But this delusional arrogance is justified by our intense, primal fear of the unknown.
And you gotta appreciate that when it was dark and we were hiding from the venomous howler monkeys and walking snakes in our early evolutionary part of our story, we had only the moon to shine down on that dark and frightening time. And so the moon is a symbol deep down in all of us related to primal fear and the unknown. And yet it still continues to be a huge piece of the great unknown.
Absolutely. But with this understanding of our limited view of the cosmos, it's really hard to question our understanding of Earth's moon. It is the sign of an intelligent mind to contemplate ideas without accepting them or denying them. So let's look into what some researchers have to say concerning the mysteries of the moon, shall we? Let's dismiss our preconceived notions of the moon and embrace the possibility that our closest celestial neighbor may just be hiding an enormous secret. In the book, Who Built the Moon, written by Christopher Knight, they state that it's true that the moon is almost certainly 4.6 billion years old. However, many anomalies about the moon suggest it might not even be a natural object.
The moon is truly strange. If we totally ignore any fringe ideas or wild theories outside of the mainstream, science still says the moon is highly irregular and totally improbable for a number of reasons. Better still, the facts mainstream science claims to know about the moon still fall desperately short of answering some of our biggest questions about it, as we shall soon learn. It's unlike anything else in our solar system, and despite its proximity to Earth, despite being the only other world humans have stood on, it's still poorly understood. First and foremost is the strange and highly improbable correlation between the apparent size of the moon and how it matches nearly exactly the apparent size of the sun.
The moon is 400 times smaller than the sun and is also 1/400th the distance between the Earth and the sun at first glance. This astonishing synchronicity of 400 between the Earth, moon, and sun seems like a highly unlikely coincidence, to say the least. What this does is every so often cause a perfect solar eclipse when the three celestial bodies align, which is something astronomically unlikely to occur in nature naturally. Experts have always been baffled at this phenomenon, with respected scientists like Isaac Asimov saying that it is, quote unquote, the most unlikely coincidence imaginable. The optical illusion is only visible to someone standing on Earth, but there is more.
Can you imagine seeing an eclipse as an ancient human? It's still a miraculous sight to behold today, even if the people who were watching it have no belief in spirituality or religion. The sense of awe and fascination remains. Naturally, these ideas are represented in mythology from around the globe. One case that comes to mind is from Aztec culture, which explains the world as having passed passed through 4 cycles of creation and destruction, dominated by different generations of sun gods. We are said to live in the 5th cycle, dominated by the sun deity Tonatiuh. According to some accounts, the sun deity Tonatiuh is thought to have been given life and risen from the self-sacrifice of 2 deities, Tequistecatl and Nanahuatzin. After the demise of the 4th sun and the world it ruled over, the Aztec gods gathered together to decide who should become the next sun god to rule over the 5th world. Thus far, none of them had volunteered willingly. As such, 2 deities were chosen: the strong and proud Tequistecatl and the lowly, poor, and humble Nanahuatzin, whose name actually means full of sores. Ouch. Somebody get him some lotion! While the proud Tequistecatl thought the transformation would assure his immortality, Nanahuatzin agreed because he saw it as his duty. The gods then prepared a bonfire, which would burn for 4 days and 4 nights. At its culmination, the 2 deities were to throw themselves off a cliff high above the fire, immolating themselves in self-sacrifice. Prior to jumping, during the time of ritual purification, the proud Tequistecatl had offered up rich gifts and coral, while the humble Nanahuatzin offered his blood and sincere penance. When it was finally time to leap in, Tequistecatl volunteered first, but suddenly found himself too afraid to leap into the flames, as the fire had grown large and unbearably hot. After 4 failed attempts, Tequistecatl chickened out. Afterwards, Nanahuatzin approached thoughtfully, took a final breath, and leapt heroically into the center of the bonfire. Not one to be outdone, Tequistecatl suddenly found his courage and jumped into the bonfire after him. As both deities had sacrificed themselves, 2 suns arose in the sky, but the deities, disgusted with the cowardice of Tequistecatl and fearing the 2 equal-sized sun would make the earth uninhabitable for the newly born human race, threw a rabbit in the face of Tequistecatl, darkening it with shame until it became the moon. This is where the man or rabbit on the moon is said to originate, and also explains why the moon and sun were thought to be equal in size, with the proud and darkened Tequistecatl standing boldly in front during a solar eclipse. Strangely, this tale seems to echo other mythologies from totally separate cultures, which also feature self-immolation and rabbits on the moon. But where does the number 400 come in? As it turns out, the god of polka, a prototypical form of tequila, named Mayahuel, had 400 breasts, which nourished 400 drunken rabbit children, the Senson Totochichen, which literally means 400 rabbits, who were venerated as the gods of drunkenness, each with a specific domain associated with being drunk, like dancing, flying, hanging yourself accidentally, or even just having beer goggles.
Pulque is really, really good. It's like a tequila, milky drink. Recommend it.
But only the elders were allowed to drink it for fear that younger people couldn't handle themselves around the lady peoples.
Makes sense.
In fact, the worst punishment for drinking polka underage was to be strangled to death. It was a serious thing.
Oh my gosh. Another incomprehensible aspect of our moon is its habit of precisely imitating the perceived annual movements of the sun each month. As Knight and Butler say in their book, quote, "When the sun is at its lowest and weakest in midwinter, the full moon is at its highest and brightest. And in midsummer, when the sun is at its highest and brightest, the moon is at its weakest." End quote.
Which is poetically quite a bit like the 2 characters in Aztec mythology, which is why looking at this stuff is important.
The extremely complex way the moon mimics the behavior of the sun alone could fill an entire book. But add on top of that the perfect mathematics to make it sync up with the Earth. It seems like our solar system has the most unlikely coincidences in the universe.
It really shouldn't happen. The apparent size of the moon and sun is so improbable. It's just bananas. Like, it doesn't require any explanation or even the projection of mythology upon it for it to be awe-inspiring and miraculous.
The moon is also orbiting Earth at an inclined 5.9 degrees to the line of the Earth's path around the sun. Earth is tilted at 23.5, but this is slowly decreasing, and in millions of years, will hit 22.1, after which it will increase once more. With these degrees and cycles using mathematics, we can perfectly estimate the cycles of solar eclipses, as well as the ancients, which is pretty cool.
They knew when the eclipses would happen.
So yeah, this knowledge of the moon's cycles is actually far older than most people can comprehend. Even the ancient Mesopotamians were using a system of astronomical principles back before written history was even a thing. In fact, more than 25,000 years ago, a lunar calendar was made that still works with accuracy to the present day. And if humans doing this so many thousands of years ago sounds like fake news, no way, this is real. The area where these calendars were found was excavated dated around 100 years ago at Abry-Blanchard in France.
And this, to me, also seems like a particularly valid point if you're discussing the moon being an artificially or maybe even man-made or created object, because it could very well be a clock that's in tune with the planet that it orbits.
Yeah, totally.
It is where we get the term month. Like, we used it to keep track of time because, you know, the sun looks the same every single day, or the moon, well, it changes like a clock.
On the walls of the cave at Lascaux is a lunar calendar known as the Isturitz Baton, which shows a 4-month and 5-month lunar calendar. And this is more than 10,000 years before the last ice age ended.
Whoa.
And this early form of the lunar calendar is essential when looking at our development as modern humans. When the mainstream narrative says that the written word and counting developed only 5,000 years ago, call bullshit.
Nah, man, they were doing astronomy back then.
They were doing a lot more than that.
We can't even do astronomy now. The Earth is flat. Nobody wants to believe anything.
Yeah, globetards. The notion of these things only coming from like about 5,000 years ago or so is pretty objectively wrong, and not the case thanks to these types of discoveries, which truly speak to the genius of our ancestors. There are a whole lot more examples in the book Who Built the Moon. Go check it out. But I don't want to bore you with too many details because, I mean, we're here for the good stuff, right? So if you're more interested in our ancient relationship with the moon, go check out the book. I do highly recommend it. There's even a chapter dedicated to the science of the ancients and how a plethora of ancient megaliths are in sync with lunar alignments.
Isn't it weird how all those ancient monoliths are aligned with the stars and celestial bodies? It's like they knew science or something.
It's like they knew a lot more than we give them credit for.
Nowadays, you just burst into the pilot's cabin screaming, "Do you adjust for curvature?" And he looks at you like your head's made of a giant melon before the flight attendants start beating you.
Then the globetards come in and try and tell you that the fucking moon is round. Like, what? The universe is flat.
Listen, man, the moon is a projection of the surface of the Earth, and it is a holographic astral reflection. Duh. That's why if you superimpose a map of the flat Earth over the moon, it fits perfectly. Didn't you know, Tim?
Keep your modern science, prophet, priest dogma to yourself. I only believe in the sacred texts on YouTube.
The sacred tubes.
It's a sacred text, man.
We'll get into the wackety schmackety, I promise. I brought some to the table this week.
In the words of Erwin Shapiro of the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, the best explanation for the moon is observational error. The moon does not exist. End quote. Yeah. The moon doesn't exist, bro.
See, he knows it's an astral reflection of the flat Earth. He knows.
Well, science can't explain the existence of the moon because it's like lightning striking the same spot a million times in a row, basically is the easiest way to sum it up. But
let's talk about it.
There are two inescapable facts about the moon. One, it is orbiting the Earth. And two, according to everything we know about science, it shouldn't be. The ancient Greeks discovered a lot with math, including the spherical nature of the Earth. Dun-dun-dun. And a rough idea about the distance and diameter of the moon. For thousands of years after the fall of the Roman Empire, the Christian church taught that the Earth and the moon were round spheres that were perfect in all ways, because nothing in God's creation could not be perfect. And the solar system, sun, and stars all revolved around the Earth. Galileo got in a lot of trouble saying that the Earth and the moon revolved around the sun, but that's beside the point. Galileo most likely knew a lot more about the moon than he let on, but he didn't say what he knew in full because he didn't want to get burned at the stake for heresy. But one of the fascinations of these early astronomers was the markings on the moon and how they got there. Sadly, it was only after Galileo's time that telescopes were actually improved to the point where they could observe the moon like in a more objective way, showing a rocky surface with craters. And this basically left the majority of earlier ideas concerning the moon proto-scientists had considered like all that came before them unthinkable. Like it was just all nonsense once they discovered that they could actually like look at the moon with telescopes. They're like, oh, I guess there aren't a bunch of monsters up there.
How come whenever you get a big popular conspiracy theory that goes against the mainstream, it's always what the Roman Catholic Church wanted us to believe 1,000 years ago? Why is that?
I don't know, man. It's probably Mari and her reptilian agenda.
Stop it. Stop misspeciesing me.
It's exactly what a reptilian starseed would say. I'm on to you. Anyway, shortly after the moon became immensely more important to civilization during the Age of Exploration, seafarers charted ways to traverse the globe based on the moon's cycles, and the Age of Enlightenment moved our knowledge of the moon even further. Ideas of the moon's origin would fluctuate over the centuries, but it was in the 19th century that a truly legitimate scientific origin of the moon came about. George Darwin, the son of Charles Darwin, put forth the Synestia Theory in 1878. This theory states that the Earth and the moon were part of the same celestial body at one time. In the planet's early development, the molten sphere rotated exceptionally rapidly.
It's funny because our theories about the moon haven't advanced all that far from that idea.
Darwin said that the gravitational tide of the sun on top of the violent spinning of the planet in its primordial molten beginning caused a part of the planet to break off from itself. And since the planetoids were still very early in their formation and not quite solid, gravity and time shaped them into the spheres we see today. And this was actually the most favored theory of the scientific community at the dawn of the 20th century. In the 1920s, another scientist named Harold Jeffreys disproved Darwin's Synestia theory. He proved Earth in its semi-molten state would have actually dampened the motion that would have required the moon to break off from the planet in the first place. The Synestia theory was mathematically impossible. Sorry, Darwin.
We're still trying to make it work today, though. We'll get to that.
The next theory of the origin of the moon that gained momentum in the scientific community was the co-accretion theory, which said the early days of the Earth could have accumulated a ring of debris, like Saturn, that eventually all came together to form a single sphere. This theory, too, lasted only a short time before being disproved. The angular momentum of the Earth-Moon system would never have allowed it, as well as many other factors that led to this theory being dismissed. The third theory that took over from those that came before was the intact capture theory, which stated that the moon was already an intact celestial sphere that was a rogue agent in space and captured by the Earth's gravitational pull when it got near the planet. This was even a favored theory at the time humans began expeditions to the moon.
This is the one theory that modern science doesn't believe. Even the two you mentioned prior were still like trying to fudge it, so they're like kind of correct. And like I said, we'll get to that. The whole captured moon idea, that just transferred over to Venus. Now we're starting to really wonder if Venus is a captured body, and we think it quite possibly could be.
That's actually much more likely because it's pretty much disproven that the moon is a captured body.
It's pretty much disproven, yeah.
From what I understood, the actual physical contents of the moon has the same ratios as Earth, so it must have come from Earth at some point.
I guess we should clarify the difference between these two ideas of how the moon formed, right? So one is saying that while Earth was still molten, it spun around and then parts of it kind of spun off and became the moon. And then the other theory is that it kind of collected debris in possibly a ring-like, formation like Saturn has, but those all ended up coming together and collecting themselves and eventually become the moon somehow. And then the third one is that it was already formed and how it is, and it was just captured by Earth and it stood there.
As we'll soon see, modern theories borrow a little bit from all of those ideas, and we haven't really changed our thoughts that much. We've just brought in computer science to try and prove what we see in our imaginations.
By the 1970s, all theories regarding the moon's origin had been dismissed, and the scientific community literally had to admit that they didn't know how or why the moon was orbiting the Earth. William K. Harman, senior scientist at the Planetary Science Institute, Tucson, Arizona, said in his 1986 book, Origin of the Moon, quote, "Neither the Apollo astronauts, the Lunar vehicles, nor all the king's horses and all the king's men could assemble enough data to explain the circumstances of the moon's birth," end quote.
Which is pretty crazy. We went there and we're still like, I don't know what made this thing.
Cool story, bro. Eventually, a theory was accepted despite the fact that it had fundamental problems and couldn't be proven, which is known as the Big Whack theory.
The Big Bonk theory.
It is a theory that originated from Soviet scientist V.S. Sovronov that went along with the rogue planetary bodies colliding idea from earlier. But they hit in such a way that magma was ejected from both spheres. The rogue planetary body flew off into space, leaving the Earth with this shot-out magma that slowly came together to form an independent body that orbited the planet. The Earth was essentially punched in the stomach during primordial times and threw up the moon. It vomited it out into orbit, but it took time to turn into the moon as we know and love today. So the Big Whack theory basically saved the self-esteem of modern scientists, and this theory only works if a second Big Whack occurs later down the line in Earth's history, which would have regulated the increase in our planet's rotation caused by the first Big Whack. Otherwise, life would never have been able to begin in the first place, and the second Big Whack would have had to have come from the exact opposite direction of the first. Highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely, yes.
Also, the majority of computer simulations that show the magma the Earth pukes up actually forms into many smaller moons, not one big one. Eventually, they did have a simulation that made our moon, but the majority of them just made a bunch of tiny little moons.
If you run the simulation enough times, you'll eventually get it to be what you want.
Yeah, eventually, after you do it like, I don't know, 100,000 million bazillion gajillion times, it does it twice.
And the existence of the moon is so improbable, it kind of justifies doing that, which is the funny thing.
It totally does. And other simulations showed that this ejected magma, would eventually fall back to Earth. So it doesn't work in a lot of these simulations anyway. It doesn't even make little mini moons. It just throws it all up back up. Like it's like when you puke into the wind outside of a car window, and like when you're driving fast. Yeah.
Your Uber driver can tell you about that. It don't make no moons. It just makes a mess.
It would have required like such a greater amount of ejection, and also to be ejected like farther out than where our moon is today. The Earth probably would have just been exploded.
That's not good.
Probably bad, just like no life, we don't exist. Yeah, that's not cool. But the other problem with this theory is that oxygen isotopes from the moon and Earth share the same signature. And this I had to look deeper into because I didn't understand any of this. What this means is that the Earth and the moon both had to have existed at a similar orbit, at a similar time, like originating in these areas, and already existed there for millions and millions of years before hitting Earth. So gravity, planetary bodies, and our current understanding of the solar system just don't work that way. It basically means that the oxygen isotopes found on Earth are the exact same ones found on the moon, which means that they originated in the same distance from the sun and the same orbits. That means that the moon has always been there since the beginning of Earth.
Just to say something that I think needs to be said, they are almost exactly the same isotope compositions.
But even then, it's like a hair's breadth of difference. Like, we're pretty sure they came from the same place, but it's possible the moon is slightly older.
So this theory has problems, but it is at the moment the most widely accepted origin of the moon. All honest scientists admit this theory seems desperate and unlikely to the extreme, but it is the best they got to work with at the moment, even though there are so many holes in the story. Another anomaly is the proportion of the moon compared to other moons in our solar system. It is proportionally bigger in relation to its host planet, other than Charon, the moon of Pluto.
And scientists don't even believe Pluto's a planet, so it doesn't really even count.
Well, yeah, the world's flat. There's no stars or planets.
But Venus and Mercury have no moons, and all the other moons in the solar system are immensely smaller than their host planet to a great degree.
The moon is so big, it's comparable to the size of Mercury.
Yet another anomaly is the age of the moon rocks brought back from both lunar missions and Soviet unmanned missions that date even further back than Earth rocks. The oldest Earth rocks date back 3.5 billion years. The oldest moon rocks date back 4.5 billion years. Still, paradoxically, the oxygen isotope signature of moon rocks perfectly matches Earth's, or close enough to the point where it's basically perfectly matching.
Perfect enough for government work.
Well, it's like, if it was just slightly off, the match would be like different than how it is right now. The isotope levels would be very different. So that they are so similar is actually, they're basically the same.
It's hard to explain.
Currently, no legitimate argument makes sense of this in the scientific community.
It's a big puzzle piece that cannot be ignored or properly explained.
Quote, "The moon is bigger than it should be and much lighter in mass than it should be. It occupies an unlikely orbit and is so extraordinary that all existing explanations for its presence are fraught with difficulties, and none of them could be considered remotely watertight." End quote. Who built the moon?
It's the wrong size, it's in the wrong orbit, it's made of the wrong stuff, and all the big theories we have today have evolved just a smidgen from our very first ideas. So that brings us once again to mythology. Did the ancients have a better idea when they described it in terms of storytelling, etc.? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's great that the ancients felt it was very important to make these creation myths a great story.
Perhaps they even hide some of the truth. So let's talk about that a bit.
We already discussed how Aztec mythology explains the similar size between the sun and moon. And then, on a different side of this idea is the Mesopotamian myth of Tiamat and some pretty fringe theories that might reflect elements of the modern big whack theory, as Tim referred to it. Now, before I go into story time, I just want to make it clear that there are two sides of me. The one who takes this topic of how the moon formed very seriously with scientific evidence and practical thinking. And then, of course, the other side of me that's all about the memes and is okay with blending myths and assumptions to tell a somewhat silly but entertaining tale of creation. The quote-unquote big whack theory, also known as the giant impact hypothesis, is a much accepted explanation of how the moon formed in the science community, I guess I mean to say.
If you looked on Wikipedia, it would say something in that ballpark, and then at the end would hedge its bets with well, we're not really sure.
Yeah, of course. This is if this did happen, here's the data, and it kind of does make sense, but we don't know if the cause even happened in the first place, but we can look at the effects of it and provide data to that. The hypothesis presents a chain of events that happened 4.5 billion years ago, like we've been saying, specifically when a Mars-sized planet slammed into the early formed Earth. This Mars-sized planet is sometimes called Theia, the Greek titan that is the mother of Selene, the Greek goddess of the moon. And there are some very psychedelic, high-resolution simulations of this event on YouTube, and they're quite recent. To me, it looks like if you got two egg yolks and slammed them into each other, and they just start spinning around each other. And like we said, in the Apollo missions, the somewhat recent analysis of the lunar rocks, they found material on the moon that had oxygen isotopes with the composition ratio that are nearly identical to the Earth, like we said. Among other findings of these isotope compositions, they also scanned some of the space dust that's out there in our solar system and beyond, and there's also some evidence that some of that space dust has the same oxygen isotope composition. They don't know exactly what that means. It could be a little bit of the event that happened that's just forever drifting out in space, never to return. Or maybe it will. Who knows? But these would be like the most compelling scientific points to bring up. All right, so now let's put on the Tim foil hats, because it's story time. And this story is probably total bullshit, as I heard it from Dan Winter, who is a little bit of a wacky online YouTube scientist guy who talks about Enochian stuff together with physics, and the list goes on.
Nothing Dan Winters says could ever possibly be wrong. Let's get that straight right now. Dan Winter is the truth and the light in the way.
Dan presents a familiar setting of planets colliding to form our Earth and Moon. Dan's twist on this is that there is and was a giant cosmic war between alien races, and this is in fact the cause of this Mars-sized water planet that he assumes is Tiamat to crash into Earth. Now, this water from this Tiamat planet is somehow, in Dan's tale, this is somehow the water from the Great Flood.
Oh.
I kind of like this. This is kind of wild, but it would mean that this crazy cosmic collision was witnessed and lived through by Noah and whoever else was alive at the time. So this isn't some 4.6 billion years ago event. It's no, this possibly happened within human evolutionary times. And Dan Winter is not hesitating to bring up how some Greek texts and the Bible explain a Earth, quote unquote, before the moon appeared in the skies. So there was a time when mankind didn't look up to a moon in the sky. I think he's making a bit of a stretch, but maybe it's facts, right? What it says in the Bible. To go a little bit even more overboard, Mr. Winter even suggests that this Tiamat was a draconian planet weapon thing that was kamikaze-like in its final function. So these reptilian, draconian, insane aliens were losing the war, and they crashed into Earth to flood it, bring us pain and torture, and perhaps live here. I don't know what the implications of that might be. Now, that's not the only far out wacky story I have today. What if I told you that Earth is still threatened by a mysterious wandering planet slamming into it? Let's say every 3,600 years? That's what Zechariah Sitchin, an early ancient astronaut theorist, wrote about in his 1976 book, The 12th Planet. Oh, you didn't know there's 12 planets in our solar system? So this guy says that there is a planet undiscovered past Neptune that is on a odd elliptical orbit, which causes it to come back into our local space every 3,600 years.
That's not too far-fetched. Big elliptical orbits do happen.
Right, and I think he's using this year, 3,600, to correspond to a grand precessional year, but we're not talking about that today. Anyway, this planet is named Nibiru, and he got this name from his own translations of Sumerian cuneiform myths. This Nibiru planet, according to Sitchin, crashed catastrophically with Tiamat. In his explanation, Tiamat existed between Mars and Jupiter. This collision supposedly created not only the Earth and Moon, but also the comets and the asteroid belts in our solar system. And to read from Wiki real quick, Sitchin states that when struck by one of planet Nibiru's moons, Tiamat split in two, and then on a second pass, Nibiru itself struck the broken fragments, and one half of Tiamat became the asteroid belt. The second half, struck again by one of Nibiru's moons, was pushed into a new orbit and became today's planet Earth. Sitchin also speculated that Pluto, which he identifies as both Gaga and Isimud, was originally a satellite of Saturn, but Nibiru's gravity perturbed it, sending it to the outer solar system and giving the body its peculiar orbital path intersecting the orbit of Neptune.
To me, none of that sounds totally impossible. Like, that sounds like within the ballpark of something that may happen, but what do I know?
That's why I had that preface. Like, I do like the scientific data that's like raw, hard proof, but like this myth, I kind of dig it. Like, what if that was the truth? Like, we don't know. Like, even the scientists don't know.
All we know is that those Mesopotamians and Sumerians knew a little bit more than they were supposed to. So I think it's worth looking at least.
So to add the final frosting to this tale, according to Sitchin, of course, Nibiru was the home planet of the technologically advanced alien god race, the Anunnaki.
Woo!
And in his words, they are the Nephilim of Genesis. And so according to this tale, right, this planet is scheduled to come back someday and try to perhaps destroy our planet.
No, it's bringing the lizard people who get excited by the heat of the sun, start drinking our blood, while they're hanging out at their swanky hotels and all the stuff the elite keep reserved for them on their return visit, and get to serve them human sushi and get to occupy an elevated status of humanity as to not be eaten or used as boink boink toys, which I'm sure some of them are actually kind of into. But that's another story.
Right. You know, that's fun too.
Wasn't this also colloquial known as Planet X?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's this lady, Nancy Leader. She claims to be a contactee of the extraterrestrials from the Zeta Reticuli. This Planet X is apparently going to pass by our planet and then like cause a pole shift.
Oh.
Yeah, this is some far out stuff, but to bring it home, I like to think about this reptilian idea, right? That's, we humans have a reptilian brain, and it's like our fight or flight mentality. It's very deep in our unconscious. And to make the assumption that they came from Tiamat, this water planet, water would be symbolic of unconsciousness. It's like this marriage of science and these alchemical ideas that I really resonate with, and that's why I'm telling you guys about this little crazy, wacky modern story today. I resonate with it on an occult level also.
It does make occult sense, but in terms of practical material science, the jury is still out on that. Now, recently, a more exotic edition of the Big Whack theory, or giant impact hypothesis, has arrived, which seems to fit fairly well with the story of Tiamat, its cataclysmic destruction and the formation of both Earth and the Moon from it. This theory is dubbed the Synestia Theory and is both tragic and beautiful. The term Synestia was created by planetary scientist Sarah T. Stewart Mukhopadhyay from combining Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, with Sin, as in synthesis, meaning together. Sin also just happens to be one of the oldest names for the moon, but I don't think that's what they were thinking of. Still, it fits. According to Synestia Theory, the Earth may have already existed in one form or fashion, maybe even with water, when a huge object smashed into it at incredible speed, vaporizing the planet entirely and mixing all of its constituent materials together into a giant donut-shaped cloud. From the center of the cloud began to form a dense, fast-spinning orb-like object called the co-rotational region that would eventually become the new Earth. Outside of this fast-spinning molten orb was something called the transitional region, which acted as a buffer between the fast-spinning co-rotational region and the disk-like region on the outermost section, which spun slowly and gradually rained molten rock down towards the inner layers. It is thought the outer layers of this donut-shaped cloud is what formed the moon. The operative idea being that the moon coalesced a little bit before the Earth, and because it did, it was sort of whirling around this big co-rotational center, and it helped form the Earth, which is why the size of the Earth and the moon are so perfect, which I also kind of like because Kabbalistically speaking, the sphere of the moon in that system of thought is considered to be like the womb, which is the foundation for which Earth Realm or Malkuth was created. If the Synestia Theory is true, then there's some literal truth to the Kabbalistic framework and a literal truth to some of this mythological coming from the unconscious, so to speak. It's a cool idea.
Wow, that is fascinating too, because if you're talking about rotational inertia and all that, the physics stuff, it would make sense that if the moon formed first, if it coalesced in the more gentler spots of that, I guess you could call it even like it's like a hurricane or a storm or some kind of a whirlpool of chaos. And if the moon formed first, that would also explain why Earth and the moon are tidally locked. And it would explain why the moon basically stabilized the gravitational coalescence of the planet Earth.
Right, which is why it's an attractive theory. What's even more interesting is that because the moon cooled first, it had a chance to sort of be like a planetoid first before the molten Earth. And we know from surveys and science that the moon had lots of volcanic activity, which has since died out. And so the theory then is that all this volcanic activity threw a bunch of atmosphere onto the moon, which didn't stay forever, but it had water in it, and there was water on the moon. So it's possible that life formed on the moon first and somehow may have been brought to Earth at a later point, which is also kind of fun to think of the moon as like a womb for the Earth.
Like an incubator.
Yes.
Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey has a plot in which our primitive ape-like ancestors discover a jet-black upright standing monolith put in place by an undisclosed power in the universe. After touching the monolith, the apes are quote-unquote activated to a process that would put them on an evolutionary path toward intellectual advancement. In this scene, the camera pans up to show the moon and sun directly overhead in sync with one another, as though an eclipse is about to occur. The movie then moves forward to the 21st century, and a magnetic anomaly has been discovered on the moon in the Tycho crater, which is then excavated. A black monolith is discovered that is obviously artificially created, and so a team is sent to investigate the alien artifact. When the team reaches the monolith, just like the proto-human apes millions of years before, the humans are mesmerized by the alien monolith. The team leader, Dr. Floyd, touches the monolith with a gloved hand. A moment later, a ray of the sun shines forth over the monolith. This time in the scene, we see the sun and earth above the monument, mirroring the opening scene. Then all of a sudden, the object transmits a signal in the direction of one of Jupiter's moons.
What's interesting is that it suggests that humans were like intended to reach that point on the moon at that exact alignment, which is like pretty crazy.
Indeed. This idea, interestingly, came from real-world magnetic anomalies discovered in the lunar mascons around the time Clark wrote the book 2001 A Space Odyssey. The mascon magnetic anomalies on the moon were theorized to be some signal. It's possible that Clark got the idea of maybe this signal being some kind of trip switch that would alert humanity to the possibility that the moon was not necessarily natural, but it would only show that signal once Earth had a population that was like intelligent enough to reach the moon. Keep this idea in mind, that an alien intelligence responsible for the evolution of humans from apes to technologists with an alarm system in place to confirm our intellectual quote-unquote arrival. Many people believe that the first moon landing was fake, stating Kubrick actually made it all on a film set. I've heard you talk about this before, Rabbit King.
I love to talk about this stuff, but I have a really nuanced opinion that nobody likes. We'll get there.
Their reasons are that there are no stars in the film footage, just a black sky. However, this is inaccurate because I took film in high school back before digital stuff just made everything irrelevant. There's a reason why there's no stars in the film footage and just a black sky. Anyone who is slightly educated in photography knows that this is because you cannot focus on two bright things and have them both come out clearly in like a camera focus. It just doesn't work. In order to have the stars in the shot, the moon's surface and the astronauts would just basically be all washed out, just like a white blur.
The only way that you can do it is if you have a prolonged exposure. So, like, if they wanted to, they could do a prolonged exposure, but, like, obviously that wasn't the point of the photo.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have been practical at the time.
And if the surface of the moon is that bright, if you left your shutter open long enough to get stars, it might just completely fill up the photo with white light. Like, it's not an easy task.
It would corrupt it, yeah. The other reason why people say that the moon landing is fake in the footage is because they plant an American flag and you see the flag still moving after they plant it, and people say, oh, it's wind. Check it out. You know, it's a film set or whatever.
This whole flag thing really grinds my gears. It really does. First of all, the flag is not waving. Not unless the astronauts are actively touching it. Just watch the footage. It's clear to see. Check the links and sources, or just type it in YouTube. Moon landing, plant the flag footage. It's not waving. Once they plant the flag and stop messing with it, the flag stops moving entirely. Second, let's assume the conspiracy theories are correct and the entire moon landing is a hoax, film on an enclosed sound studio. Why would there be enough wind inside this sound studio to make the flag move? Or would it be? Not unless giant fans were brought in on purpose. It has never made sense, this whole flag thing. Never once has it made sense.
Yeah, but it makes sense if you use the flat moon theory.
Got me
Anyway,
Everything,
I know, right?
everything makes sense when you implement the flat moon theory. So just believe in it.
Yeah, globetards.
Whatever the Catholic Church believed 600 years ago, that's the truth, okay? We all should go back to having the Catholic Church be in charge of everything. Don't you know? Aren't you hip?
Yeah, back then they believed that if you drank horse piss, it would cure certain sicknesses.
Which is true. And everything was honky-dory 600 years ago. That's why all the paintings and the artwork from the medieval period, which is also made up, they don't know how to accurately portray suffering because everything was amazing when the church was in charge. Duh.
Yeah, everybody knows that. I mean, you could just use basic soap to cure the Black Plague, but who needs that when you got stinkiness?
Stinky.
Anyway, I do say that I call BS on the phone call that the president makes to the moon. That's bullshit.
Did he really call the moon on a phone?
Seriously, if you go to, there's like a museum that has this phone, and it's just a stupid 60s phone. So yeah, I call bullshit on that. That was just totally made up BS to pwn the Russians, to make Nixon look good or whatever. And though many of the reasons conspiracy theorists say the moon footage is fake is pretty easily debunked by experts, there's also the whole thing surrounding moon rocks taken back from the moon that have qualities not found on Earth. This basically shows we objectively, factually have been to the moon as well, because if you talk to geologists, you ask one of them who knows about the moon rocks, and you say, hey, what about the moon landings being fake? They'll just laugh at you. And now I'm not saying that conspiracies don't exist, because they most certainly do, but evidence does suggest that we did indeed go to the moon. If you want to believe that the first landing was fake, that's fine, whatever. You know, Mari is a reptilian, but we definitely did go there eventually, no matter what conspiracy theories are out there say.
Now, to play devil's advocate, I do think it's within the realm of possibility that the footage used for the Apollo 11 landings were maybe faked. Even still, if it was, the lack of stars and the quote waving flag are far from being the smoking gun. If Stanley Kubrick did help create fake moon landing footage, he did a much better job than conspiracy theorists want to give him credit for. Furthermore, I sincerely believe we did land on the moon and take samples, as Tim suggested. Many technologies we take for granted today, like smoke detectors, scratch-resistant lenses, memory foam, diapers, and Velcro, were created from the space program. So if that's the case, why the hell would Stanley Kubrick be called upon to create fake footage of the USA landing on the moon? I could think of at least two practical reasons. Long story short, it was a distinct possibility the moon landings themselves would be a catastrophic failure. Just the previous year, Neil Armstrong on May 6, 1968, crashed his lunar module simulator into the desert, which necessitated him activating his parachute ejection seat before impact, a safety feature the real lunar module did not have. There was a pretty decent chance that in performing a landing that had never been done before, both Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong could have just smashed unceremoniously into the lunar surface. Had this occurred, it would have been devastating in terms of optics and been a soul-crushing tragedy for America. If we consider the point of the landing on the moon itself was largely to psych out the Soviets and was a propaganda mission itself, this would have been seen as an unacceptable risk, which Stanley Kubrick, being on our team, would have made avoidable. It seems most likely that this was the reasoning. It seems worth mentioning the maneuver Neil Armstrong was responsible for executing perfectly the first time in an unexplored environment thousands of miles from Earth was called a suicide burn, and was necessary to perform it that way because it just so happens to be the most fuel-efficient method. A suicide burn involves waiting until the last possible moment to slam on the booster at maximum power, slowing the lander's descent as quickly as possible, as close to the lunar surface as possible, which is both ridiculously difficult and dangerous. Doing any other maneuver meant the lunar module would not have enough fuel to lift off again and rendezvous with the orbiter, leaving them stranded to die slowly on the moon. Also not good for PR. There was a lot of room for total disaster. In such an event, it would have only been prudent to have footage of our success to show the public. I think there's a strong case to be made by interpreting the symbolism of Kubrick's The Shining to back up the idea that some of the footage was faked by Kubrick and it was coded into the film as a sort of confession.
Does it matter to you at all that the owners have placed their complete confidence and trust in me and that I have signed a letter of agreement, a contract, in which I have accepted that responsibility? Do you have the slightest idea what a moral and ethical principle is, do you?
Or perhaps the confession was about something even more miraculous on the moon, but it's hard to say. We do know Kubrick was into the idea. With this in mind, 2001: A Space Odyssey was created by a man with a superbly competent understanding of what space was really like, and if he did fake footage for the moon landings, it was done by a masterful hand which would not be so easily debunked. The second reason is my favorite. What if there are monoliths or other artificial structures visible on the lunar surface, and we wanted to check them out without public scrutiny on the matter? What if the powers that be know for a fact the moon is unnatural and just don't want us to find out the whole truth?
That's no moon. It's a space station.
Because they don't know the whole truth.
Well, to what you're saying about the suicide burn and all that, the way that the lander had to be meticulously controlled in order to land safely and to have enough fuel left over. I mean, does anybody remember the arcade game Lunar Lander? Because it's like impossible to win, at least from my perspective. I always crash and burn.
Like, they had to be going super fast and headed towards the lunar surface, which was difficult to see because they had tiny windows. Nobody had ever done it before. And they have to like wait until the exact moment to where there's like the point of no return. Like, if we don't hit the boosters now, we're gonna die. Okay, now hit the boosters.
You know how many arcade games you have to play of Lunar Lander to get to that point where you understand the physics of it? Like, it's so hard. You're just like thrusting the boosters needlessly and floating above the surface until you can land softly. No, they came in straight at high velocity and then they thrusted it on at full blast and were able to perfectly set it down. Like, there must have been, if there was a mishap, I could see how Kubrick was brought in to make it look like it was a perfect landing when the mission was technically successful, but not very graceful in execution.
Yeah, I mean, it would only make sense to have that footage available. So it's possible we've never seen the fake footage. It's possible we've never seen the real footage. It's hard to know for sure.
But yeah, the other structures on the moon, there's also a lot of talk about, okay, well, what about the dark side of the moon? Or there's also rumors going around that the people like Buzz Aldrin and the other astronauts walking on the surface of the planet saw weird stuff like inside craters or floating above the surface, and that was scrubbed from the records or classified to where we can't see any of the pictures. So, I mean, it could be an artificial structure. I mean, it really could be.
That's my favorite contention, is that there was stuff there they didn't want to show us. End of story. So what we got was fake. So let's talk a little bit about the lunar anomalies that science does acknowledge.
Originally, scientists were pumped that the moon rocks might actually prove at least one of their theories concerning the origin of the moon. Sadly, to disappoint the scientific community, the rocks just brought back more questions.
Which is great. If they wanted to have this huge theory that everyone was supposed to believe, getting the moon rocks back and being like, I don't know, was really not the best option they could have chose if they were lying, you know? Now, as discussed before, the stable isotope ratios of lunar and terrestrial rock are more or less identical. They imply a common origin. According to NASA.gov, this chunk of bubble-rich lava collected by the Apollo 15 astronauts typifies the surface rock of the dark maria, or seas of the moon. Tremendous volcanic eruptions about 3.5 billion years ago flooded much of the moon with molten lava, resembling the volcanic rocks found in Hawaii and Iceland. Unlike Earth rocks, the lunar specimens contain no water. The nature of the gas that made the bubbles remains a mystery. There's just some gas they're like, oh, we know there was some gas. We don't know why it was there or what it was doing there, so like, they just don't know.
Mystery moon gas.
Sometimes you just got some gas. Another famous anomaly. happened to the doomed Apollo 13 mission. When Apollo 13 had to ditch their Saturn V booster, weighing 15 tons, it crashed into the moon with a force equivalent to 1,000 million bajillion tons of TNT. NASA reports of the incident talked about the scientists' astonishment when the moon rang like a bell from the impact.
Almost like it's hollow. So Wikipedia states, on April 14th, 1970, the Apollo 13 Saturn IVB upper stage impacted the moon north of Mare Cognitum. The impact crater, which is roughly 30 meters in diameter, is clearly visible in this image from NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter released in 2010. NASA reported that the moon rang like a bell, quote, for almost an hour, leading to arguments that it must be hollow like a bell.
Whoa.
I've heard this theory, and it's really weird because you can actually record those sounds from Earth too. You can detect the vibrations, and it travels almost like there's no solid interior.
In 1969, the Apollo 12 crew had a similar experience, but to a much lesser degree. The moon being struck made a really weird sound, a sound that a celestial body with a core shouldn't make. This led to two possible conclusions. The moon had an unusually light core, or even possibly no core whatsoever. These artificial moonquakes completely rewrote the book on theories about the moon's interior, because it is Maury's reptilian ancestors' space station. The prolonged reverberation was nothing like what happens when objects hit Earth's surface. The Brown Root and Northrop Corporation at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, who were some of the prime contractors for NASA and supervisors of the Data and Photo Control Department, said the Apollo 13 crash that caused the moon to ring like a bell also made the moon's whole structure wobble in a precise way, almost as though it had gigantic hydraulic damper struts inside it.
Oh man, it's a giant base.
Yeah, it's like it's made to actually take impacts. Dr. Sean C. Solomon, professor of geophysics at MIT and the director of terrestrial magnetism department at Carnegie Institute of Washington, as well as the principal investigator for Carnegie's research as part of NASA's Astrobiology Institute, said, quote, "The lunar orbiter experiments vastly improved our knowledge of the moon's gravitational field, indicating the frightening possibility that the moon may be hollow."
Whoa.
Yeah, right? The idea of the moon being hollow was familiar to the scientific community, and theories had been around for some time, but there was never evidence like this before. And exactly why would he consider this whole thing, this idea that the moon being hollow, why would he consider this to be frightening? It's artificial. Sorry, I got my tinfoil hat on.
So why can't...
We haven't even gotten to plate tectonics yet. You just wait. This gets way more weird.
Read the next part, because, like...
Carl Sagan, professor of astronomy and space science and director of the Laboratory for Planetary Studies at Cornell University, hinted at the answer when he said, whilst discussing the moons of Mars, that, quote, "It is well understood that a natural satellite cannot be a hollow object," end quote.
Well, how do they know that, though?
You tell us, Mari. You're the one that's got the base on the moon with your
But couldn't
reptilian
it have
homies.
formed naturally, and then, like, maybe it peed out all the magma, and now it's just a husk?
You just wait till we get to plate tectonics. The hollow moon idea was scary because it suggested that the sphere was artificial. This is a big problem for the scientific community and for Malachor 5s everywhere.
I'm not a Freemason, by the way. No reptilian blood in these veins.
Yeah, me too.
That's exactly what reptilians would say.
Stop that!
I'm on to you.
I'm getting mad at you now. Like, seriously, like, quit that.
You and Mal. Holy shit. You kind of sus. The University of Arizona and wait, how do I say this again?
Tucson.
The University
That's
of
what
Arizona.
a non-Earth type wouldn't
Yeah.
know how to read that.
Yeah. Go ahead and say Tuscan, because you're going to say it anyway, you freaking alien.
Your blood and suffering is so good.
The University of Arizona in Tucson interpreted data from the lunar prospector magnometer that estimated the moon could still have a core. It's just super duper small, like really, really small. Lon Hood, the team leader, said, quote, "We knew that the moon's core was small, but we didn't know it was this small."
That's what she said.
This adds weight to the idea that the moon's origin is unique, unlike any other terrestrial body, Earth, Venus, Mars, or Mercury.
Girl, it ain't the size of the core, it's the motion in the ocean.
Still, this is just an interpretation, Mari. It's equally possible the moon is hollow or has a tiny, tiny abnormal core, most likely being kind of spongy.
Don't put Venus in there as a regular planet. There's a lot of weird stuff about Venus, too. Don't get me started. It has a tail and it's spinning the wrong direction. How about that?
So doesn't Mercury do that too?
No!
Oh.
Venus is the only planet that spins backwards and has a tail. That's the planet that wasn't around during the ancient times that was captured. That's what it was. That's what's his name? Dan Winter. That's what he's talking about. Okay, I've said my thing.
You still got a whole lot more to go, bro.
Although it's unlikely scientists will declare the moon is either hollow or a secret base for nefarious bipedal reptilian overlords anytime soon, there still exists a number of anomalies which suggest there are still secrets hidden beneath the lunar surface. Since sending probes in preparation for the Apollo missions in the 60s, scientists have been aware of numerous gravitational anomalies about the moon, which are well known for sending spacecraft into irregular elliptical orbits, which, if left uncorrected, can send expensive craft crashing into the lunar surface in just a number of weeks. Like, those things have a limited amount of fuel, and so if they have to keep correcting their orbit, they're pretty much doomed. That's why that's a problem. As of 2013, these gravitational anomalies have been identified as a side effect of what are called mass cons, which are short for mass concentrations, and is a fancy way of saying there are huge clumps of unevenly distributed matter hiding beneath the surface of the moon. Are these the damping struts? I don't know. The prevailing notion is that these mass cons are due to large impacts which were common when the Earth and Moon were still being formed, and the heavy parts basically sunk down and pulled more heavy parts down, clumped together in uneven rings of fluctuating density radiating outward from the center of the big clumps. So it looks like a bullseye. You've got like a big thing of mass and then a circle of nothing, and then a circle of a lot of mass and then a circle of nothing, like a bullseye, darts board
or like
thing.
the rings of growth on a tree. Like if there's a wound in the tree, the ring will be thicker there because it was healing and putting more growth there. So but it also has to do, for the moon, it would be having to do with like what elements were there or how hot it was at the time that it sank down.
And these are the mass cons we mentioned earlier. They're also identified with magnetic, not just gravitational anomalies. And we mentioned that this was the inspiration for those black monoliths in 2001: A Space Odyssey. So there are weird anomalies there. And as much as I knew about the moon prior to this episode, I had no idea about mass cons. I understand that gravity is the weakest of the four fundamental forces, and as such, it's easy to take it for granted as being a noticeable factor only on extremely large scales where an enormous amount of mass is present. So the idea that the moon would have a sufficiently lumpy enough gravitational field to throw spacecrafts out of orbit is news to me. And honestly, it sounds a little bananas. The only way it sounds possible to my amateur understanding is if the interior of the moon truly is emptier than we first imagined it to be. Like, we got mountains and big stuff on Earth, which do cause gravitational fluctuations around the sphere of the planet, but they're not so extreme that they'll deorbit spacecraft. It could just be because it's tiny, but yeah, if there's something big enough to deorbit a spacecraft, it seems reasonable to me that that thing is just way lighter and emptier than we think. Now, the second thing I learned during this episode is just as weird as the first and fits with some of the outlandish stories that SRI remote viewer Ingo Swann claims to have seen while remote viewing the moon. Since at least the 6th century, humans have been carefully documenting a phenomena on the moon we know today as TLP, or Transient Lunar Phenomena, which, according to Wikipedia, is a short-lived light, color, or change in appearance on the surface of the moon. It should be mentioned that some of these temporary lunar phenomena are actually permanent. Sometimes the moon just changes. Now, according to Winifred Cameron, an American astronomer who helped out on the Gemini and Apollo programs, TLP come in 5 different categories. 1, gaseous, involving mists or other forms of obscuration. 2, reddish colorations. 3, green, blue, or violet colorations. 4, brightenings. And 5, darkening. At least a third of these events are recorded to have happened around the vicinity of the moon's brightest landmark, the Aristarchus crater. I also couldn't help but notice that this astronomer lady's name, Winifred, is the same name that Stanley Kubrick chose for his female protagonist in The Shining, which, if you follow the memes, is secretly about the moon. And so, from somebody who understands what things look like on camera, that's what Winifred was all about. Like, she documented and became famous for collecting all of these TLPs and archiving them. There were like 2,200 and odd number of them since the 6th century, and they're well documented. The moon, when you look at it, has all this stuff that's constantly changing. And like I said, it does have to do with what Ingo Swann, the famous remote viewer, saw on the moon. But if you'd like to hear more about that, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you this extended episode, but all our extended episodes going back to before the before times. I'll send you a 5x5 vinyl sticker at no extra cost to you, and you'll get the secret keys to our Discord server where you can ask us questions about the moon until the cows come home, and the cows don't know where they are, and they're not gonna find it. Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew pew. I wish Cryptic would do it. Do it, Tim.
Poo poo.